Welcome into episode 343 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridgette Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridgette and Scott, they say that hockey players are very tough, but I'm here to say right now, so are hockey podcasters, because our own Bridgette, less than a week, I believe, after surgery, she's back in the pod. And
last Friday had ACL surgery, so 6 days ago.
Yeah, so just very absolute tough cookie. The doctor said 4 to 6 months, and she's here a week later. So
I'm pretty sure I am pretty sure I'm doing stuff they don't want me to be doing. I just walked down 4 flights of stairs, and it took me 10 minutes, but I did it. Not sure they would have liked if I did that, but here I am. So I had to get the job done, guys. So I'm here, still in pain. Turns out I have a screw in my knee. Didn't know that was happening. You know, when you get out of surgery and you're kind of like dazed a little bit, and they're like, just so you know, when you go through the airport, you're gonna have to tell people you got a screw in your knee so that it don't like stop you and so you have metal in you.
Yeah, I have 4 screws and a metal plate in one of my knees, and I amazingly don't set off the X-ray machine, or at least I haven't, like at airport or games or anything.
Is that a thing? Does that happen to people? That happens to people?
It happened to him. It used to happen to my dad. He had like metal in him from surgeries, and so I don't know if they just use like different metal or if X-rays now can detect when it's actually like in your body or something.
Wait, am I gonna get stopped every time I go through security at TV Garden?
Yeah, I think they're just not going to let you in. I think you're
okay. Great, that's what you're hoping for. Which, by the way, is still like probably a week away from being able to go to anything. Like I don't see myself being able to get my leg in my car and drive. But once the time comes, Scott, you're gonna have to help me. You're gonna have to help me get through security.
Well, we'll smuggle you in.
Yeah, exactly.
So, guys, we are in approaching mid-September now. We're recording on September 12th, and rookie camp started yesterday. And it goes through, I guess we'll call it next Monday, I think, is their final rookie prospect challenge game up in Buffalo. And then shortly thereafter, training camp starts on September 18th, and that will bring us right through until opening night. I believe it's October 8th or October 7th against the Panthers. And today, Scott was actually at the Bruins annual golf outing and was able to speak to some of the members of the team as well, including Jim Montgomery. So, Scott, I'll throw it over to you and start us off with the opening shifts.
Yeah, so Bruins' top 2 prospects, as people know, Fabian Lysell and Getty Merkulov, are, it's going to be a lot of eyes on them come the start of training camp on Wednesday. They are not at rookie camp. They are not playing in the Prospects Challenge. They've kind of aged out of that. Ryan Mougenel, Providence's coach, told us on Wednesday that he believes the organization just wants them to focus on getting ready for training camp. Didn't see as much value in going out to Buffalo. Talked to Jim Montgomery about both of them on Thursday at the Bruins Foundation golf tournament down at Pine Hills in Plymouth, and he said, what he wants to. He said, like, yeah, both are gonna have a chance to make a push, and what he wants to see is them, help build a team game. He said, like, they're not going to come in and play the same roles that they played in Providence, where they were the 2 go-to goals, the 2 go-to scorers. As Jim Montgomery said, we have David Pastrnak, we have Brad Marchand. Like, that's not going to be your role here, so you're going to have to bring more. Obviously, we had heard Brad Marchand say something similar last week at captain's practice when he said, if you're going to play in a line with Marchand and Charlie Coyle, you have to play defense. You have to be responsible. Like, that's what the expectation is. So, I think that they're kind of setting out like the clear expectations of what they want to see from these two guys who are going to have a very good shot to make a push. We'll get into it more. I'll also note that Montgomery said he at least to start camp views Merkulov more as a center than a wing. I know that had kind of been a question, where will they put him? Where could there be an opening for him? But it sounds like he's going to start in the middle, which is his natural position.
So the biggest storyline for the Bruins this offseason, following the additions of Lindholm and Zadorov, obviously at free agency, has been the Jeremy Swayman contract negotiations, or for most of the summer, lack thereof. And until it's resolved, it's just going to remain a story. And I don't think any of us really have a major interest in rehashing what everybody, including us, has been talking about all summer. But I will say, to be consistent, in my opinion, Swayman signing in Boston's always been a matter of when, not if. And so this isn't me talking about being scared he's not going to be a Bruin, but I do think it's fair as we approach training camp to start to talk about the when part of it, and when does it become a distraction, and when is it beneficial for them to sign him. Obviously, the answer to that is yesterday, right? But with training camp starting next week, I just think that the sooner the better. Just it absolves any distractions, people asking about it during camp, and it also allows the player to get on the ice. We saw him at captain's practice, and Scott asked Monty at the golf outing about the Swayman, his opinion on how everything's going and whatnot, and Monty just said that veterans typically don't ramp up until the end of training camp anyway. So is September 18th a major deadline to get it done? No, but I still think we'd all feel comfortable if he got signed, hopefully prior to September 18th. And so I just wanted to bring it up, and we'll talk about that later as well.
Yeah, which by the way, that's only 6 days from now. But it kind of sounds like we might be looking at first week of October is maybe like a closer timeline. Because if you're talking about not needing to get it done till late in training camp, that's, at the end of the preseason, that's the first week of October. So I don't think anybody would be happy.
That would be a long delay.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would be happy if it's still outstanding at that point, because then we do have to talk about, like, okay, what the heck's going on? Like, well, what are the other alternatives? So it does become a distraction, like you mentioned, Brian. So anyway, my opening shift, we had to talk about this because even though it's not Bruins, the other professional hockey team in town just got a new name. The PWHL Boston team just got officially named the Boston Fleet. And in my opinion, I love the logo. I love the B. The anchor looking B and the color scheme I really like. Boston Fleet, not terrible. I thought that it was definitely not the worst of the names, and I liked it better than the Boston Wicked, which was one of the things that they trademarked, and everybody was thinking that's what it was going to be. I was really happy when I saw it wasn't that, because I, as a broadcaster, didn't want to say Wicked over and over and over again during a game. So, like, selfishly, there's certain things I just don't want to say. Like, you know how annoying that would be if I was like, all right, wicked forward, Hillary Knight. Like, it would have been so annoying. So I'm glad that wasn't the name. I think everybody was really.
Would it have been wicked annoying?
It would have been wicked annoying.
You would sound like an actress in The Departed or something like that.
Yeah. And see, I like to think that I don't actually have a Boston accent, but maybe I end up with one with, if the team's named Wicked and I'm just dropping Wicked all the time. But I don't know about you guys. I'm happy with the Fleet. I thought that Frost was a really good name as well for Minnesota. Some of the other ones, not quite sure how I feel about them yet, but I think a lot of times names you just got to get used to. And I think there's a lot they can do with Fleet, like a lot of like cool knights, like, I don't know, pirates or ocean or different things that you can have promotionally. That would be really cool. So
they can play at the Fleet Center.
So when they teased it, they play in Lowell, obviously, right now, which, by the way, they confirmed they're playing there again this year, but that they're in talks to see if there's somewhere else to play in the future. But when they started doing the teasers, they did like a few different pictures, and it was like the ocean and like a wave, and I'm like, oh my god, the Loch Monsters, guys. It was right there, but obviously trademark you can't. But I was thinking maybe,
What's an alternative arena that they could play in? I know we talked about Aganis in the past, but that just might not work out with BU's schedules and whatnot.
It's going to be hard at Aganis. I've talked to people from Hockey East that were not, at least as of right now, thinking that that's a possibility in the near future. I think they're talking to the Garden, to be honest with you. I'm not sure how far that's gone. But yeah, Hockey East, there's a lot of great schools, but there's challenges, especially since Northeastern is going to be out of a home. Some games are going to have to be played at other rinks. Certain rinks are probably not up to snuff for it, but Ganis obviously is. But this year, Ganis has men's and women's because Walter Brown's getting renovated. So yeah, there's some obstacles.
Because the reason I ask is that from a capacity standpoint and a amenity standpoint, I feel like Songus is actually a good rink for them.
I love
it's just that it's a little bit north of the city, but I don't know if you're not going to play in actual downtown Boston. Scott, I know we've talked about people from like the South Shore that driving up to Lowell is a bit of a hike for them.
It takes me an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, but I just don't know. Like the Garden, I guess, is an option. I just didn't think about that because none of the PWHL teams are playing in 17,000 seat arenas. So I just was kind of calibrating my mind to
Minnesota played a good chunk of games in the Wilds Arena last year.
Oh, well, I stand corrected then. So maybe the Garden could be an option. Yeah. Harvard's another thing I was thinking of. Harvard
is
Ganis.
Possible. No, I wouldn't want Harvard.
No
Harvard. In my mind, that's out. It's pretty small. It's kind of old. It's impossible as a broadcaster. Is the hardest place I've ever broadcast. You broadcast from behind the net.
I mean, is how much further is the Duncan Center from Boston than Songus? Maybe an additional
Providence?
10 minutes.
Yeah. I think it's called Amica Pavilion now. I mean, it'd be great for me. I live about 15 minutes away from there. So
yeah. There's just a lack of options in actual Boston. That's why I'm asking, you know. But maybe they can build an arena. I don't know. But I mean, they might take some time.
I don't know if that's going to be in the works. Yeah, I think Bridgette, I don't know if you can confirm anything. I don't think they've announced it, but I did see a report that they're going to be playing at least one game at the Garden this year, or were had that in the works. So
they have not confirmed that yet. No one will. They've actually really kept things under wraps quite well from leaking. I haven't heard that confirmed. No.
Yeah, no, I'm glad they're selfishly, I'm glad they're in Lowell for at least another year. It's very easy.
Yeah, because it's like a 5-minute drive for you.
Yeah. but I definitely get that it's like the kind of the same thing that the Revolution deal with, where it's like, yeah, the diehards will go, but your biggest fan base is in the city. It's young people in their 20s in the city, and that it is a challenge for a lot of people, and especially that drive to Lowell. When you get off the Lowell connector, just that last couple miles to Songus on a weeknight can be absolutely brutal. Yeah,
it sucks. It sucks getting out of there too. Oh, it's terrible. I dread it. And I don't even I don't know. I dread it.
But sometimes it happens. I mean, the Ottawa Senators don't even play in downtown Ottawa, I don't think. But even more locally, I mean, the Patriots play in Foxborough, and for anybody that's north of Boston, that's a nightmare, especially getting on Route 1 on a Sunday. So sometimes you got to drive to go see your teams play.
Yeah, but Brian, I have to do it every game.
Yeah, I know. That sucks. Sorry about that.
It's not just one time.
Yeah, fair enough.
But anyway, do you guys like the fleet? Do you like the logo?
Yeah, I do. You're right. It's way better than Wicked. I don't think I necessarily have anything better in mind. I think it's pretty solid. I think it makes sense. It's a good logo.
Yeah.
I ranked the 6 in terms of combining name and logo. And I think Boston was second. I think Montreal has the best combination of name and logo, the Victoire.
That one's not easy for English speaking broadcasters, but it's okay. It's not too bad.
You got to tap into your French background.
I know. Luckily, I have that. So.
Yeah, I like the fleet. Bridgette, I saw the comparison to the Hartford Whalers. You were kind of mentioning if you flip it in the other direction. Yeah. Obviously, the colors are a little bit different, darker. But yeah, I like it. The Sirens, the New York Sirens, I hate that logo just because of the extra, they make it look like a siren, the way they spell it out, and I hate that. But yeah, overall, they were some unique choices. I think Bridgette, you kind of said some of the names we'll have to take getting used to because there's not traditional hockey names. But hockey team
I
names.
was
But yeah,
really hoping for Toronto Queens, and they went with Scepters. And I'm guessing maybe Queens there was a copyright issue, but like all the teasers was like it was a
now they're gonna
queen,
get
and I'm like,
sued by
that's
Taylor
awesome.
Swift because their logo just looks like a Taylor Swift logo.
It does actually, it does. But I was hoping for the Queens, right? The NHL has the Kings. PWHL, it felt like a really slam dunk name.
Expansion to Los Angeles.
there you go.
Well, Toronto, I thought it made sense. Like all the teasers was like showed Queen Victoria, and it showed like Queen's Square or whatever in Toronto. I'm like, Queens, perfect, love it. And then it wasn't, and I was a little disappointed. I thought that would be cool.
All right, so let's shift back to the Bruins, and again, we mentioned it. Rookie camp is underway. So, Scott, I know you wrote an article about players not named Lysell and Merkulov to keep an eye on, but you also had an opening shift regarding Merkulov and Lysell. So maybe we can complete that thought and then move along to some of the lesser names on paper that might make a push as well.
Yeah, I think everyone expects Lysell and Merkulov to make a push, and they should be able to. Now, that's different than actually making the team, right? Like, to me, making a push means you're playing well in camp, in preseason games. You're around until the very end, and you force the team to make a real decision, like Matt Poitras did last year, like Mason Lohrei did last year. Remember, Lohrei got cut, eventually, like the day before the opener, like at the exact deadline to finalize your roster. That to me is like the bare minimum of what Lysell and Merkulov should be doing. If they're like an earlier round of cuts, that would be pretty disappointing to me. Like I think you need to at least see that even if they don't make your opening night roster, that they're going to be ready and able to contribute sometime soon, sometime this season. Like, Lysell obviously has the clearer opening as a right wing. Like we've talked about it all off season. That's especially on the second line. But even if, say, Trent Frederick gets moved up there, okay, then there's an opening on the third line. So there should be an opening for him somewhere if he can force his way in. Merkulov's a little more challenging because, again, going off Montgomery's comment today that he views him more as a center, at least to start camp. The Bruins have more depth there, right? Like we've run through it, whether it's, you go Lindholm, Coyle, Poitras, Beecher, Kastelik can play center. Frederick or Geeky can play center. Like Zaka, obviously. There's a lot more options there. So for him to force his way in, you're looking at you're probably beating out, at least a Beecher and maybe a Poitras to really force your way in. So I think he has a little more of an uphill battle, but he forced his way into a call up last year. Didn't obviously get the best chance to do a lot with it. But put himself in position to be ready to be the next guy up. Like, injuries happen, right? Matt Poitras' season ended with an injury last year. Like you just at least need him to be like right there, ready to go, kind of first center up when the time comes, right? Like don't fall off and allow them to, okay, we'll call up Patrick Brown because that's just a safer bet and we know what he's going to do and he'll play defense. Like, no, make sure you're like right at the door knocking and not going away.
You hated Patrick Brown last year. Right out of the get-go, you were like,
that
what
was
are they
you,
doing?
Brian.
No, I didn't care about Patrick Brown. I knew he was a depth forward. Scott was like, what are they doing with Patrick Brown? He's such a waste of time.
Not true. Not true. Number one fan.
That was, yeah. Don't you remember that Scott's in the Patrick Brown fan club?
Oh, that's right.
By the way, you know who like every young player from Providence talks about as being a good influence on them last year?
Patrick
Brown.
Ah.
There you go. See, the character guy.
I talked to John Farinacci on Wednesday at rookie camp. Talked about, learning last year in Providence. First name out of his mouth was Patrick Brown, learning how to be a professional.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's a good dude. Seems like a good dude. I would love to have Georgi Merkulov on at some point on this podcast in the preseason. Because I think we brought this up last podcast. He's been training with Mishkov this summer, right? So he's been training with one of the top two guys going into this next NHL season, like Celebrini and Mishkov. So it'd be interesting to just hear how his summer has gone and how he feels in compared to last year in terms of making the team. And he's also, somebody that we don't get a chance to talk to a lot. So it'd be nice to have him on here for a little bit if we can get him in the preseason, which normally we get a few guys. So I think that would be one to target. I think you guys probably agree with that.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe. I don't know that he's the most engaging interview. Like, and I don't even mean that as a criticism. Like, obviously, like, he's from Russia. He didn't pick up English till a teenager. I just don't think he's not comfortable like with media yet, but it could still be worthwhile.
So that might be fair, but wasn't I thought he had a like an outgoing. I thought it was mentioned in the past he had like an outgoing personality.
I think he's one of those guys that like teammates will say once you get to know him, he's really funny. I don't know that I'm ready to get that out of him. Like, I don't think we have that relationship. So
don't worry, guys.
We'll take care of him. Bridgette and I got it. You're good, Scott. Just mute yourself. All right.
I'll just crutch up. I'll just like hobble over and I'll just be an icebreaker immediately with how much I was
gonna say, like, if you fall like on your way over, like, there you go. And now we got we just need you to re-injure your knee, Bridgette. That's all.
Yeah. No, trust me, guys. When you see me in person, I'm really not moving great. I don't think that there's anything else I need to do. I already look ridiculous. So,
but let me ask you guys this question: as it pertains to Merkulov and Lysell and their future with the Bruins, or their future of becoming a full-time NHLer, based on their age, their career so far, their skill set, and their expectations. Who do you feel of the two has maybe more pressure of like a now or never training camp, whether it's with Boston or just in the NHL in general? Would it be Merkulov simply because of his age over Lysell, or is it Lysell because of the expectations and just the pressure mounting now that he's been in the Bruins system for 3 years?
I think it's probably Lysell because of the expectations, because of being a first-round pick. And again, because of the positional opportunity that's there. Like, it feels like he's the one who has had the door opened up for him the most. So yes, he is younger, and I do get the argument from Merkulov because, he is kind of getting to a point where it's like, okay, are you an NHLer or are you, quadruple A, to steal a baseball term, like always going to be really good in the AHL, but never quite makes it. But Lysell, there has been real pressure, and I think remains real pressure to be an NHL player. Like, not a star. Obviously, if you get there, awesome, but be an NHL regular and stick and make an impact. First round pick that's a real investment in you as a player. So, and now the opportunity is there for him. I think he's put pressure on himself as well. Like, I think he feels like he's ready and wants to show he's ready. I'm sure he was frustrated that he didn't get a call last year. I know, after the season, right, Don Sweeney said, oh, he was really close. He probably would have at the end of the season if he hadn't gotten hurt. And it's like, yeah, okay. Like, it's easy to say that, once he's injured and now it's not an option. It's easy to be like, oh yeah, we probably would have called him up. And it's like, okay, well now, like, let's see if he actually gets that opportunity and takes advantage of it. So I think there is more pressure on him, probably.
I think that it's not the end of the road for either of them if they don't stick this season. If they don't, there's obviously different levels of it too. Like, if they make the team fall off, like, there's just so many different things that could happen. I don't think it's necessarily the end of the road for either of them. But I think because Merkulov is Russian and potentially might just decide to go play in the KHL means it might be more now or never for him, because at some point he could just decide to go back and play back at home. And from what I understand, they make decent money there as well. So it could just be a comfortability thing. Maybe he likes it here better. Maybe he likes it there better. But I don't think it's the end of the road for either of them. If they think that they made progress, then you just keep whacking away at it. Though I will say, if Lysell somehow goes the entire season without a call up, then that's really a huge issue, right? Like if we see the same thing as last year and he doesn't even get a sniff in Boston, then I don't even know where the conversation goes to from there, because it seems like this should be the year that he's at least emerging in some way, whether that be for a majority of the season or even just like, 20 games or, or even less than that. Like he should be getting at least a chance at some point when there's an injury or there's performance issues, and he should be forcing the hand of the Bruins to have to lift him up and put him into the lineup. So I think we'd be having a very probably negative conversation if we get almost to the end of the season and he hasn't been called up, and barring like an injury. I'm like saying, like, if his play hasn't warranted it down in Providence, then that's, what we can circle back and have that conversation. And was this the last like real chance in Boston, at least for him?
Yeah, no, great points by both of you guys. And I feel like there's a lot of competition for both of these players to crack the lineup themselves, right? And I know Scott mentioned that Montgomery is viewing Merkulov as a center heading into camp. But again, at the end of the day, you have a couple of forward spots open, or do you, right? And they're kind of vying for them. So basically, if you have a good enough camp, you got to force them to keep you. And sometimes that means a coach changes what they were hoping, right? So, but if you look at that second line, right, you obviously have Frederick, you have Brazeau, you have Geeky, you have Patra, should they want to move him to the wing just for no other reason than to play with some higher end players with Marchand and Coyle and get some more NHL experience. You have Max Jones, who could have a third line ceiling. You have Johnny Beecher. You have so many internal candidates that could step up into that second line role. You also have those candidates that are also vying for the third line. You bring in Tyler Johnson on a professional tryout. Potentially Blake Wheeler, I think, is still lingering out there. There's been a lot of PTO signings. He still, I think, is out there. So if you're Lysell, there's a lot of guys that are willing and fighting to play on that vacancy on the right wing on the second line. And if one of those guys makes it, now Lysell's looking at a third line opportunity where there's another plethora of players that just like that's where they would fall. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a challenge. And I'm hoping that he's seeing all this and is going to come to camp with a hair across his ass, ready to show that he can win those one-on-one battles, that he can, play that necessary gritty style that you need in addition to skill at the top level. So he's been put on notice for sure. And it's going to be up to the player to have a strong camp. And Merkulov with the KHL, Bridgette, you're right about that. It's almost, you guys are, both of your answers were kind of right. It's almost like there's more pressure on Lysell, but maybe it's more now or never for Merkulov because he might try some other options. But in any event, it's going to be fascinating to follow.
Yeah, like, and by the way, like, that's another thing Montgomery highlighted with Lysell was winning battles, right? Like helping the Bruins win the puck back so he can then go do the things that he can do offensively. Not just waiting for other people to win it back so he can get going, but being actively involved in that gritty work to get it. But yeah, like, I feel like with Lysell, like Bridgette, as you're talking, it was like, yeah, he needs to, or maybe not needs to, but like should at least have the kind of season that Beecher and Laura had last year, where there might be some up and down. Like, maybe you don't stick the entire season start to finish, but when you're up, you're up for longer periods of time. When you go down, it's with an express intent of like, hey, this is what we want you to work on before you come back. Like almost with an understanding that you are going to be back, but this is what we need you to go work on right now. Like I think you really want to see at least that. Like at least be involved enough at the NHL level that it's like, okay, this is someone who is part of this team. And even if he's down in Providence right now, we all expect he's going to come back at some point, help them down the stretch into the playoffs. Like that is what Fabian Lysell's season should be at the very least. You're right. It should not be another AHL season. It should not be even, oh, well, he got called up for, a couple of games, a little cup of coffee, nice reward, and then he got sent back. No, like it should be longer call-ups, time in the NHL, like really establishing himself as a player.
And last year in training camp, if you were to watch Lysell's performance, he looked like a player who knew he had to perform offensively to impress, or so he thought. Hopefully, going into this training camp, he's learned his lesson that don't go out there and try to put up 10 points in a preseason game and risk the sacrifice the other elements of your game that coaches are looking at, right? Like,
truthfully,
yes,
they're probably looking at that other stuff more than they're looking at the offense.
well, and
in terms of like, okay, you're not NHL ready if you're only playing on the offensive side of things and finishing. Like they're looking for the whole package. So
right. And I think if you look at Matt Poitras last year, it was those goals that got everybody talking about him, right? So there is a bit of a superficial element to, like, if someone's popping off offensively, like they'll get noticed more so than someone just doing the right thing. So you do kind of have to do both of it, to your point, Bridgette, like, hit on all cylinders. But if he can at the very least show that he has evolved as a player in those areas, I think it'll go a long way. It might not appease the person that's sitting at home watching a Bruins preseason game looking for him to score 2 goals a night, but it might do something with the people that are making the decisions.
Is anyone doing that?
I don't know. Maybe.
Is anyone like, hey, he needs 2 goals tonight?
Maybe.
Guys, I got money on it.
Maybe. Any follow-ups on that? I had a question, Scott, regarding rookie camp.
No, go for it.
Okay, so for my own knowledge, I'll admit, but also maybe for some people that were looking at the rookie camp roster, rookie camp is not simply for prospects that are at the professional level, like the minor league level, like that are going to Providence. You still have rookies that are going back to juniors or potentially their college teams. I'm not sure on that because I was curious on the absence of Dean Letourneau, at least as a
so no college guys because they're getting ready for their college season. So teams would rather those guys just stay on campus. I don't know if they're even allowed to participate because of the, amateur versus pro thing where this is like an official team activity outside of development camp.
Yeah, I don't think they're allowed to. I don't.
So NCAA players are omitted from rookie camps across the league.
Correct. Yeah.
And but players that are going to play Canadian juniors are not exempt.
Yeah, so they got like some OHL guys and yeah.
Yeah, because it's like a more open agreement between the CHL and NHL that they're not as worried about, are you playing with professionals or playing in professional games or any of that stuff. And also I think CHL teams start their practices a little later than college teams. Like college teams start September 1st. So like they're already 2 weeks into practicing. Mm-hmm. So so like a little bit of a difference there. So yeah, for the Bruins, it's a lot of Providence guys, it's ECHL guys, and a couple guys who will, who might end up back in major juniors, and then a bunch of invites, just undrafted guys that they want to bring in, take a look at. Again, those are a lot of guys playing juniors, or maybe they're guys who are in the minors who, are free agents who don't have a contract somewhere yet. So a bunch of those as well.
So thanks for clarifying that, because I feel like it's very easy to assume that if you're drafted by a team, you should be invited to that team's rookie camp. But when you mention college players are already on campus and they're going to class, and that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're past the point where like college kids, that's the focus now is playing at BC or PC or wherever you're going. Is there anyone, Scott, that you are really interested in because this is kind of like one of the ramp up events, I would call it, into the NHL season that it doesn't get a lot of attention, probably because a lot of these guys are kind of further down the line of making a push. It's not normally like a this year kind of push necessarily. But is there anyone here that when you went, you watched and you saw something out of you weren't expecting, or because you were the only one of the three of us that was there?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really get much from one practice.
No.
For guys that I'll be watching though this weekend in the Prospects Challenge, and in those games, Riley Duran is someone that Don Sweeney mentioned by name on July 1st as a young player who can make a push. Turned pro out of Providence College last year.
I can talk about him too. Yeah.
Played a handful of games with the Providence Bruins. Personally, like I still feel like he's a year away from making a real push, but listen, like if the GM's gonna bring you up, then obviously he sees something. Like, Don Sweeney is the one ultimately making these decisions, so he sees something in you.
Yeah, so can I just talk about him real quick, because I did a bunch of PC games last year, and Don Sweeney was at a lot of them. Adam McQuaid was at a lot of them. Bruins management, who was in charge of keeping an eye on prospects, had their eyes on Riley Duran this past season. He had another year left of eligibility. He decided to go pro. He had some inconsistency issues. He's a really gifted goal scorer. At one point, I'm pretty sure was trying to do a Michigan, didn't score on it, but then scored like 2 seconds later. He's got this great offensive skill set, great stick handler, really good vision, but he's not one of those grinder guys. He's kind of best when he has a lot of space. Though I guess everybody is. Very smart, offensive-minded kid, good on the power play, but there's certainly aspects of his game that need to develop before he makes the pros. And I would say being consistent is really big for him, because he'd go on like an 8-game point streak and then he'd go cold for 10. That was just kind of the season that he had, and you see flashes of how good he could be. But I think you're right when you say he's a year away, because there was definitely stuff that in Providence people could help him iron out, and then he'll have a better chance.
Yeah, see, like this is what gets me with Riley Duran is, and like just even in camp or in games at Providence, like, yeah, like you do see the little flashes of like offensive talent, but he played 3 years of college and was under half a point per game for his career. Like, I hate to break it to people, those players don't score in the NHL, like very, very rarely. So you're gonna have to make it as a fourth liner. So that grind, that compete, the defensive details, like that's all going to have to be there. We talked to Ryan Mougenel on Wednesday, who obviously had him at the end of the season down in Providence. And, he made a comment along the lines of like, he felt like they kind of took the handcuffs off him when he got to the Providence Bruins. He was saying it without trying to indict Nate Lehman and Providence College at all, because that's a very good relationship between the Bruins and Lehman individually. But you get the sense that maybe the Bruins didn't like the way he was being used in college, or
I think it was Riley Duran who didn't like. I think it was him, the player, who didn't like the way he was being used in college.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, but yeah, I have a hard time imagining a player scoring with any regularity in the NHL after he had 16 points in 35 games last year. Like, it's tough for me to see, and it would buck history and a lot.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, Scott. I mean, you never know, but you can make your best guess based off of what you were just mentioning.
In the college hockey circles that I am having conversations in, a lot of people thought maybe he should have stuck around for senior year, but maybe he thinks the growth in Providence in the AHL rather than Providence College is something that's going to help him get where he wants to go quicker. So he's certainly someone to, I believe he's wearing number 62 in rookie in the Prospects Challenge, if it's the same as what they have listed on practice the other day. So look out for him. Another guy that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is Trevor Kuntar, 61. So 61 and 62 are the two numbers that I'm interested in seeing. Trevor Kuntar.
By the way, I should note before you go further on Kuntar.
Yeah.
People can watch the Prospects Challenge. It's going to be streamed on the Bruins website. The first game's Friday at noon. Then it's Saturday 3:30, and then a Monday morning 10 a.m. game. But Bridgette is doing a good job mentioning the numbers because you're going to want to have a roster in front of you because usually there is no play-by-play for these.
Scott tweeted one out, by the way. So if you're looking for one, go right over to Scott's Twitter, grab it. It's there.
So you're going to want to have a roster handy because you're probably going to have to identify the players yourselves if you're watching.
Yeah, there's not normally a broadcaster, so we could do a Twitch stream. I'll call it for you guys if you want.
But so there was Kuntar, there was Durant, and then any others that popped to you, Scott?
Yeah, so I posted something Thursday morning on weei.com, great website, on under the radar players who can make a push, and mentioned Durant. I didn't include him as under the radar because again, the general manager named him. Had Kuntar, and then another one who's playing the Prospects Challenge that I mentioned is John Farinacci, who if you look at any ranking of Bruins prospects, he's top 5 in all of them and top 3 in a couple. Had a really solid first year as a pro down in Providence last year, 38 points in 71 games. I think he was 5th on the team in scoring. He's not flashy. He's not big. He's not the fastest guy. So there's not like his game doesn't jump off the page to you, the way like a Lysell with his speed does or Kuntar with his physicality does. Trevor Kuntar is a very physical player. But John Farinacci is just like a really smart player, two-way center who just kind of does everything well. And those guys are valuable. And those guys often have homes on fourth lines. So I could see him, again, like, as we've talked about with all these guys, it's like there's a whole long list of names that you pencil in ahead of them, and for Farinacci, who can be probably center or right wing, it's Beecher, Kastelik, Brazeau, Patra. Like, it's that whole list. But it's like, I just wouldn't rule out him making a push. Like, he's 23. He's not 20. He played 3 years of college, had an interrupted college career at Harvard because Harvard missed the entire COVID season. The Ivy Leagues didn't play. He had an injury that cost him time at one point too. So
he's another guy I broadcast games that he was in back when I was working for Yale, and he is just a solid 200-foot center. Like, he is a smart player. Obviously, I don't mean that in like, okay, obviously he's from Harvard, he's smart. No, like, if you watch him make decisions with the puck, he's not turning it over. He's in the right places on the ice all the time. He's very good facilitator. So he was one of the best players on that Harvard team. And when he was the captain at the end of his college career. So he was a pretty high-end college hockey player back then. And the Bruins, if you remember, well, I know you guys do, didn't draft him. He ended up with Boston because his the team that he was drafted to, the clock ran out on him having to go there. So he decided to come to Boston and signed here last offseason. And I had a solid year in Providence. So yeah, I liked his college game a lot, actually.
Yeah, he was also one of the best players on the U.S. World Junior team that won gold in 2021. He had 5 goals in 7 games in that tournament. So, there is some history there of production playing with other top players in his age group, at least.
Yeah.
And the Bruins NHL roster right now. Yes, there's a question mark on the second line on the wing. People are asking if Elias Lindholm could be a number one center on a cup hopeful team. Those are some higher end questions up the lineup. But as far as down the lineup offensively, they have plenty of depth. So it's going to be a very difficult challenge to surpass one of the names that you mentioned, Scott. But that shouldn't stop one from trying. But if I'm Farinacci or I'm Kuntar or one of these players, maybe a Duran, my I guess backup plan, at the very least, I want to be impressionable enough so that when a Bruins need to call somebody up, I'm the first number that they're looking for. Now, sometimes it depends on who goes out of a lineup and what you're looking for in a replacement, but generically, it's usually like a fourth line type call up for injuries or whatnot. I want to be that guy if I can't make the team out of camp.
Well, by the way, Farinacci's number 32, if you want to watch him. But what I will say is Justin Brazeau, we didn't have him on our radar at all at this point last year. So like Justin Brazeau just popped right through. And for some of the non-skill reasons, like the size and the grit and the ability to finish in front of the net, sometimes that's what teams are looking for. Like that's what the Bruins were missing. So he ends up there. That's the kind of guy you have to pass too, right? Like we're not just talking about passing Fabian Lysell and Georgi Merkulov. We're talking about guys that are already on the team and they're big, like Justin Brazeau.
Yeah, and Brazeau last year in his limited regular and postseason sample size, he was scoring at an 82 game pace of like 27 points, 25 to 30 points, low end, high end, over the course of 82 games. So to have his size and to be a 25 to 30 point potential player for the Bruins based off of his sample, in my opinion, unless he goes backwards big time, I think he's a regular in the lineup next year. I think a lot of those guys are. I mean, so it's going to be interesting to follow for sure. And were there any other rookie camp developments or takes, I should say, before we move on to the Swayman stuff and finish up here?
Not really. It's I almost kind of feel bad because like we don't talk about any of the young defensemen as much, and for obvious reasons, there aren't the same openings back there. But I do think like Frederic Brunet is a really interesting player to watch. Has been an offensive defenseman. Acknowledged, he needs to get better defensively. Don't think he's ready to make an NHL push, but Ryan Mougenel said he's going to play top 4 minutes in Providence this year. And he's going to play in more situations than he did last year. So I think like he's someone whose development is going to be interesting to follow because he definitely could have an NHL future. Probably, certainly not right out of the gate this year, I don't think, and maybe not at all this season. But again, if you're tuning into prospect games or you just want someone to follow in camp or preseason games because he's going to be in main camp. So, he'll be there. And I think there's, defensemen who can bring some offense, like that's a harder part to develop. Like usually by that age, either you have offense or you don't, and maybe you can build it, you can build more, but generally someone doesn't go from being like a defensive defenseman at 21 to suddenly putting up points. But you can teach an offensive defenseman to play defense. And that's the development that Brunet is going to have to take.
And a name on the back end, since you bring it up, Scott, that I've been interested in down the line is Jackson Edward. And he is he just kind of he looks like a player visually that you would see in Slapshot or an old school hockey movie. He's a big body. I think he's a left shot. I think he's somebody that down the line could be like a potential. Well, it's tough to speak on his NHL potential right now, but what the Bruins probably hope is that he could be a shutdown, maybe middle pair, bottom pair guy that plays with snarl and his right now he's playing in London, I think, in the OHL, and he's obviously a big staple for their blue line.
He's going to be in Providence this year. He'll be in the AHL.
So he'll be fun to watch. It'll be fun to see if his snarl and compete, how that translates at the AHL level. I don't see a reason why he won't thrive in that environment. So he's another name that's interesting to watch.
Yeah. Go ahead.
He's really physical, sometimes to the point where you have to rein it in. But again, we're talking about like the Bruins want that, especially on the back end. So yeah, like there's a prospect who has it.
And it's just such a short window of time to like have the eyes on you in the prospect challenge as well. That sometimes you got to make a statement, right? So maybe we'll see some sort of big physical statement from him. He's number 41. Guys, 2 goaltenders that are going to be at prospect challenge, Keegan Warren and Ryan Bichelle. I'm not going to lie, I don't know much about either of these 2 guys. Neither of them have played in the AHL before. These are guys, Bichelle out of Notre Dame and Warren out of Moncton in the QMJHL. So these are guys that I'm interested to see, but it's kind of one of those wait and watch kind of situations for me with how goaltending is going to look in the prospect challenge this time.
I'm not all that interested, to be completely honest.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say without saying is
like not to be
I don't know if there's much to watch there.
They're borderline non-prospects.
Yes.
Bichelle's already 25, I think.
Yeah.
He was an older college player.
Yeah.
He's
the only guy on this roster born in the 90s. So.
Yeah, he's organizational depth. Like my guess is he's in the ECHL with Maine. And Warren was a camp invite. So I think Ryan Mougenel said he had some sort of connection to him or something, knew someone. But you need 2 goalies just to go through rookie camp. So if the Bruins didn't have a second one in-house, they had to invite someone.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's just their backup plan for if the Swayman contract never works out.
And by the way,
obviously I'm joking about that.
Yeah, but the reason why these are the 2 guys in rookie, not rookie camp, in the prospect challenge is because the other guys in the system are in college or they're too old to play in this. So that is why those prospects, you're not going to see them here, because like Philip Svedback is back at Providence College and Brennan Bussey is not young enough and will be playing in regular preseason and stuff. So that's why you won't see them in this.
So Bridgette and Scott, prediction time here. The Bruins and Jeremy Swayman will come to a contract agreement on or before September 18th, the start of training camp. Yes or no? If your answer is no, what's your opinion on the longer drags and just the benefit or the negatives of not getting it done sooner than later?
So I don't know if I brought this up on here.
What do you have another podcast that you want to tell us about?
No. Just in real life, like I'm sure you guys probably had some of this too, but like all summer long, it was like any cookout, anything with friends, family I went to, people were like, when's Swayman getting done? When's Swayman getting done? So I had just started telling people September 14th just to like give like a firm answer. That was just like the random date I picked and just told everyone it's getting done September 14th. That is not 2 days away as we're recording. That's on Saturday. My actual prediction now is I don't think it's getting done September 14th, and I don't think it's getting done by September 18th when training camp opens. I think this is going to linger into a few days of camp is my prediction. I think maybe by the end of that first weekend, so around like 15, 16, 17, like somewhere in there. I still don't think it drags on too long, but we've seen, even if we just keep it local, like in 2017, we saw David Pastrnak as a restricted free agent signed on the first day of training camp. 2 years later, Charlie McAvoy in 2019 as a restricted free agent. This was the contract before his big one. This was like a bridge contract. But he signed that 3 days into camp. He missed the first 2 practices of training camp. So I could see something like that. Like I could see Swayman not being on the ice the first couple days, but then something gets hammered out. So I'll predict a no. It's not done by the start of camp, but I also won't be worried unless it starts dragging on into like a week into camp, a week and a half into camp. Like then I think you can start to worry a bit.
I don't think it's done by the 18th either. So I'm with Scott on that. I really hope it's done before September 22nd, which is the first preseason game, though Swayman probably wouldn't be playing in that anyway. You probably see Brennan Bussey or someone else in that. But still, like, you want him to be practicing with everyone. And so it has gone on longer. I can say for sure longer than I thought it would. I was in the same boat as you, Scott. People asking me, "Oh, when's Swayman's time? When's like we know?" But I just always just said September. And if it ends up, we're late in September, then I'm gonna start to worry a little bit because at that point, that would mean we're probably 2-3 preseason games in. If it's not done, before October 1st, that's a real bad sign. And in terms of like what the holdup could be, it kind of seems like right now maybe length is an issue on the contract as well, because some of the reporting we've seen was not the full 8 years of term, which maybe isn't the amount of security that Swayman wants. It sounds like they were still moving parts in terms of length as well as actual dollars. So hopefully, for everyone's sake, it gets done before the first preseason game, because I know coach doesn't like answering questions about it. Swayman's got to be sick of answering questions about it. The whole team probably is sick of
And
hearing.
I don't think Swayman's sick. I think he wants to go on more podcasts.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, but I'm just saying, like, it's a tired conversation to continue to have because there's not a lot of anything new to talk about because it's not done, and I'm sure he'd just like to have it done. So
yeah. Well, but until it's done, he's not going to be.
By the way, he can feel free to come on this podcast if he'd like.
Yeah, right. But to Scott's point, Swayman has been the one to vocalize it on a different platform, and then until he signs, he's not going to be at media availabilities, I would imagine. So, but yeah, you guys are kind of right on the money. I think obviously it'd be great to have him signed yesterday. And I think it would be great to have him signed for training camp. The Bruins open their season on Tuesday, October 8th down in Florida. If he's not signed on or before Tuesday, October 1st, I think that both camps should, be ashamed of themselves that they couldn't get to an agreement a week before the season. And I think both camps should wear egg on their face. Who has more? I mean, that's subjective and up to everybody to decide themselves, but just in general, like, it takes two to tango. And I think that I just think at the end of the day, both sides need to just you have to compromise. You have to meet somewhere in the middle. The reality of the situation is that Jeremy Swayman is 25 years old. He's a top 5 goalie in the National Hockey League, and he deserves to get paid. However, the other reality of the situation is that he's played 43 games in a given NHL season as a career high. So his workload volume is, I don't think anybody doubts it, but as far as negotiations go, he doesn't have that leg to stand on. He's a restricted free agent. So again, both sides have their leverage, but I think when push comes to shove, if both of these camps try to call each other's bluff, I think at the end of the day, the players' camp would have their bluff called before the teams. But I could be wrong about that. I'm curious what you guys think. Like, if let's say it was like October 7th or whatever, and the Bruins were starting their season the next night, like, who do you think would be the first side to like finally give in? Probably the player side, but it shouldn't get to that. Obviously, I'm just more so talking a lot for podcast sake. But yeah, I think it should get done before October 1st, and otherwise, it's going to be a shit show.
How have Korpisalo and Bussey played in the preseason in this scenario?
Well, there you go.
Like, I mean, like, I'm joking, but like, honestly, if it came to that, like, that would probably be part of the equation. Like, are the Bruins sitting there going like, "Holy crap, we don't have another goalie"? Like, Jesus Christ, we really have to get Jeremy Swayman on the ice? Or are they saying like, hey, you know what? These guys have played pretty well and we like how they look.
How dumb
and if
would
this
that be
drags
to
on
base
another
it off?
week, then so be it.
You can't base it off that. That would be the dumbest thing. Like, no. No. They have to have Swayman. Like, there's no.
But Bridgette, we're talking about if it drags on that long, we're talking about like caving. Like we're talking about how much patience you can have. I'm not talking about like trade him away or don't sign him. No, I'm talking about like if you're getting close to opening night, are you in any position to be able to wait out another game or 2 games or 3 games? Like, obviously, we're not there yet. So, like, we can cross that bridge when we get there. But
we're not there, but they haven't given us a reason to. But they keep giving us the reason to discuss because it's not done. And, we are getting close. Scott, to your point, it's not the first time that a player has gone into training camp with an unsigned deal. In fact, I don't really remember much chatter about McAvoy that year not being signed, but maybe there was. But maybe the goalie position just had. But then again, McAvoy's the franchise defenseman. I feel like people would have been going crazy then too. Were they not? Or maybe they were.
No, there was some of it, but I think part of it then was that there was sort of this understanding that like McAvoy was still one contract away from his big payday. Like, I think that was a 2-year deal or maybe 3. But he was so young that he was still going to be a restricted free agent at the end of that. When he then finally did sign his big contract. So you're right, there wasn't this same anxiety because it was just sort of understood that like, yeah, he's going to get, like, I think the market was pretty well established for what a young defenseman in that situation got. And it was just a matter of getting there. And then you knew the next one was going to be his big contract. Whereas like Swayman, it's like, again, we'll see where this ends up. Like, this could be his big contract. This could be the one big payday of his career if it goes 8 years. To me, like, it feels like this would be more concerning if it ends up as a shorter term bridge deal, because Swayman would then be an unrestricted free agent at the end of it. You wouldn't still have team control when it's up.
Yeah. And so Shesterkin still hasn't signed yet either, has he?
No, actually, funny you bring him up. I saw a report today that actually I think it was from your friend Molly Walker. That he's probably waiting for Swayman.
And Swayman's waiting for him.
Well, but Swayman can't wait for him. Like, Shesterkin has another year. He's good for this season.
True.
So.
Right. But that brings us to something Swayman mentioned on the Mark podcast. Was it Mark? What's his last name? Scott Lewis.
Kusi. Shut up, Mark.
Like where he like talked about like trying to set the market for his like fellow goalie brethren. It's like, Swayman, I love you, but it's like that's just like that type of stuff. Kind of like, it's, don't let that like, again, Swayman, I love Swayman. I want him in Boston for the next decade. And he's one of the best goalies in the league. But the reality of the situation is he has shared the net just about 50-50 with Linus Ullmark the last 2 regular seasons. And the first one, Ullmark won the Vezina. So when push comes to shove, you're an RFA that has shared the starting job. If you were to sign a deal for $64 million, call it, over 8 years, like, buddy, that's amazing. Like, unfortunately, despite your top 5 goaltending talent and your very bright future as such, you're in a contract negotiation where you're an RFA that doesn't help them, and then you've split the net. And the reality is, you don't have Linus Ullmark next year to carry half the games. You have Jonas Korpisalo. So if Swayman's going to play, call it 55 games, that's still 12 more than he's ever played in a regular season. And that's probably, they hope that number climbs. So it's not that nobody believes you can do that. It's just that you haven't yet. And it's sometimes negotiations, always negotiations, are black and white from both sides. And that's why you're not going to get what you're asking for. And the team's not going to pay what they're hoping to pay. Just meet in the middle and get it done so that we can all stop talking about this. I don't know why everybody's being so stubborn. It's like, come on now.
Yeah, and it's sort of weird too. Like, the like Swayman and Shesterkin, wanting to like comparing those two situations because they're just not in the same place. Like, really, the more comparable situation is Swayman right now to Shesterkin signing the contract he's on now. When Shesterkin signed his current contract, which expired, it was a 4-year deal that expires after this coming season. He was 25 years old, a restricted free agent, same as Swayman. The previous season was the first year post Henrik Lundqvist, and Shesterkin really started stealing the job from Alexander Georgiev as that year went on, and had clearly emerged as the number one. Just like Jeremy Swayman started stealing the job from Linus Ullmark, becomes the clear number one. Like, those are actually the more comparable situations. And Shesterkin at that time signed a 4-year deal worth, I think it was 5.6 a year.
Yeah, 5.
Which I bet, like, these reports that like the Bruins offered 4 by 6 or 6.2 or whatever. Like, I bet that's where that starting point was for the Bruins, is like they're comparing him to Igor Shesterkin at the same age. Like, if that's true, like, I bet that's where that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good point, Scott. Are they wrong? Are they wrong to negotiate?
Well, we're
that
also
way?
3 years later, so like the price should probably go up by more than $500,000 a year.
Yeah. But are they wrong? Are they wrong to go with that bridge 4 years here?
I mean, I think so. Like, I would just go long term. You're going to have him his whole prime into his early 30s. Whereas, okay, you go 4 years. If he keeps playing at this level, then you're in the same position that the Rangers are going to be in with Shesterkin, where people are talking about Shesterkin might be looking for $12 million a year. Like, I don't know if you can get him for 8.5 now instead of, fighting and struggling and playing tug of war to get him to 7.5. And then in 4 years, he's going, okay, well, now the market's at 13.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I think
I'd rather just go long term now.
Yeah, I think 8 years, call it, 7.75 to 8.5 or whatever in that range. I think it's a win for both sides. I really do, and I think that should be the target. So we'll see.
Yeah, hopefully it's not one of those cases where I post this and it's like Jeremy Swayman signs a new contract right after we talked about it.
Oh, we know it's coming because that's the Skate Pod way,
Yes, it is. Is there anything else you guys want to mention before we sign off? I know we had put in our group chat a few different teams announcing guys that they're going to bring in for PTOs.
Right.
Like Pacioretty going to Toronto. Did you guys want to talk about any of those? Because there's a few that came out this week.
Well, as it pertains to the Bruins, I don't think anybody necessarily saw him coming back because we all saw the writing on the wall, but JVR signs a PTO with Seattle. Pacioretty with Toronto, as you said, Bridgette. Kyler Yamamoto, who we talked about on a previous podcast, signed a PTO with Utah. Obviously, Tyler Johnson in Boston. There's a couple others, Scott, maybe you have them up. But I think Blake Wheeler is probably the one we have mentioned that I haven't seen any news on. But yeah, definitely some movement around the league, some opportunities to some players.
Yeah, I don't have the whole list, but you touched on like the most relevant ones, I think. Pacioretty, the reports were like they intend to sign him to a contract unless something goes like horribly wrong in camp. So that seems like a little more than, oh, we're just going to bring him in and take a look. Like, that actually seems like the Leafs intend to sign him, and that's an interesting move for them because they lost Tyler Bertuzzi. They didn't really replace him, so there's a clear opening there on left wing. Pacioretty's the left wing with long track record of scoring, who's obviously had injury troubles the last several years now. But that could be like a sneaky, really good move for the Leafs if you get a healthy, productive Pacioretty. But obviously, there's a lot of questions about whether you will.
That's a guy that gets under fans' skin too, and him coming back to the Atlantic would probably be a pain for Bruins fans after the history with him in Montreal and with Boston. And but I mean, I personally think he still has enough left in the tank to be an impactful player for Toronto, like fill that gap and make the team. So that one is like there's some of these guys that are on these PTOs. It's like, I don't know if they make the team or they don't, like including JBR. I don't know if he ends up making the team. Depends on what Seattle is looking for and how he performs in camp and whatnot. But Pacioretty is someone that I would expect to land somewhere and stick. So Toronto, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, interesting is the word. It's just that, and Scott mentioned it. I mean, he's had way too many injury issues. He can't be trusted as it pertains to staying healthy, which is no disrespect to the player. It just happens. But I mean, in the last 4 years, Pacioretty has played 48 games, 39 games, 5 games, 47 games. A point total probably around 50 over 4 years. So it's difficult. They're definitely taking a flyer on him. I'd be interested to see what he would sign for. I think off the top of my head, another couple PTOs. I think Tyson Barrie may have signed a PTO for Nashville. Old friend Jared Tenorti over in Calgary. But
that guy, he keeps getting back on the ride and just he lands somewhere else every time.
Yep.
I mean, size and toughness will keep you around for a while.
Do you think Blake Wheeler will probably get one? Do you think Boston's no longer a destination potentially? Think it's not going to work out?
I feel like they would have already brought him in if that was, because like Tyler Johnson's been in town. I think he's been on the ice for a few captains practices. So
yeah,
I kind of feel like they would have already made them. I guess you can't rule anything out, but I feel like they would have already done that if they were going.
But wouldn't the same go for other teams too, though? Like,
yeah, I don't know, maybe, but there might be some teams who haven't, announced PTOs yet. Like the Bruins, we know they already brought someone in, so it's like, they've been thinking about this, working on it. So it's now been a week since the Tyler Johnson one was announced. I feel like if there was another, we probably would have heard it by now, but still possible. There's still 5 days before camp starts. So
yeah. And we talked about it. There's a ton of competition right now. If you're Fabian Lysell to even crack the roster, George Merkulov. So if you bring in Wheeler on a PTO, that's even added competition to an already stacked training camp roster. So, okay, Bridgette, Scott, I think that probably wraps it up. So as you mentioned, the Bruins will be live streaming their 3 games in the Prospect Challenge. So Bruins fans you can start to watch some Bruins hockey, some players in Bruins uniforms at least this weekend into Monday. Not exactly the big team, but some interesting names we talked about earlier. And then next week training camp starts, and before you know it, it's going to be October 8th. So a lot coming up here.
Yeah, and we're planning we'll start ramping up episodes, as the Bruins ramp up here. We're planning to have like a camp preview episode. We'll probably dive more into some of the roster battles and just storylines we're looking for. And then it's reaction to camp, reaction to first preseason games a week from Sunday. And they have the this got announced, and maybe it's gotten lost in the shuffle a little, but on Saturday, the day before their first preseason game, they have a black and gold scrimmage down in Providence, which they used to do like almost every year and haven't done in a while. But that'll, they'll treat that like a preseason game. Like you'll get 2 full teams of Bruins players basically. So
yeah. And if you're like me and you live closer to Providence,
right, there you go.
It's a good spot for you. Yeah.
Well, Bridgette, Scott, it's been a very fun summer doing these episodes. Obviously, there's only so much you can talk about over the course of 3-4 months in the summer, but I think we did a pretty good job. And but as Scott mentioned, we're going to start ramping it up now, so you can expect, certainly I would say by maybe the week after next, maybe once training camp comes around, you can probably expect the Monday, Wednesday, Friday release schedule to pick back up, as opposed to 2 a week, sometimes 1 over the course of the summer. So that'll be great. And I'll be in I was talking to Bridgette and Scott. I'll be in Quebec City this weekend, so I know sometimes we get some comments. So if anybody has any recommendations on good eatery, or I've been to Quebec once, but it was I just remember walking around a little bit. So if there's anything outside the city, Scott gave me some suggestions. Bridgette was so kind enough to mention that she's never been, so tough shit for me. But if anybody has,
no, I'm jealous. Can I come with you? You just have to carry me everywhere. It's fine. It won't be too much of a burden.
Put you on the top of the car like a Christmas tree.
Yeah. No, have some poutine for me. There's some good Canadian craft beer actually. Scott and I had some when we went to Montreal. They actually got some decent IPAs up there now. Definitely have some of that. But yeah, specific places I can't help you, Brian. I've never been. I'd love to go.
Poutine
I don't
is
know that
definitely
I don't
what
know
I'm
that Bridgette
in the
would
market for.
hold up too well in Quebec City right now. It is
Ooh.
it's a great walking city with lots of hills. So
Lots of hills.
And like stones that I would hit my crutches on. And
isn't there like a ski lift that pretty much brings you down to old
there
Quebec?
is, yeah. There's like a
great
yeah.
guys.
What do they get? Like it's not a gondola, a funicular or something. I
Yeah.
forget what they call it.
I'll just
Some
take this.
French word.
I'll just take the stairs. But yeah, any good poutine recommendations, that'd be great. Because got a few days to check those comments. But then I'll come back and then off and running with training camp in the regular season. So Bridgette, Scott, thank you very much, and thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you next week. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.